This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first session this morning for the CCLC conference. I'm going to make sure that the waiting room is empty. Just one more moment. Okay. Well, hello again. Good morning. My name is Max Cordero. I'm with the Peninsula College Fund. I'm going to be the session host / tech support for this session. So I'll be mostly in the background, but I'm here to introduce this space, as well as set up the Zoom and make sure everybody is able to view the content and interact with everything correctly. So if there's any questions that you have about Zoom or anything not related to the content of the presentation, feel free to message me. We're joined here by our host, Melissa, and we have some panelists that are going to be introduced later. And so if you have any questions in terms of the content, you can direct your questions directly to them or just message the chat broadly. But before we get started, I just want to remind folks that this is going to be a Zoom conference. And so making sure that your video is on so that our lovely presenters can see your faces and interact with you in that way while we're presenting. And make sure that you are having your computer plugged in so that it doesn't die midway through any of these presentations. And again, if you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to put them into the chat. There's going to be a couple of polls set up later, as well as breakout rooms. And you will be able to choose which breakout room to go in yourself based on the panelists that you would like to speak to. And if you have any questions about that, also feel free to ask any questions directly towards me. And so without further ado, if there's no other questions, please again direct them towards me in the chat. I'm going to have Melissa take it over to start our session.
Great, thank you, Max. Hi, everyone. Welcome to PCF's day one of their College and Career Leadership Conference. I hope you all are having a very gentle morning and are ready to get started. My name is Melissa. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. And sorry if I sound a little funny. I'm getting over COVID, but bear with me. So yeah, this session is titled, I Graduated, Now What? And we'll be talking about considerations about taking a gap year post-graduation. And yeah, if anyone doesn't have any questions right away, we could just get started. Great. So first, I just wanted to show you all a little bit of an overview of what we'll be covering today. So we're going to go over some objectives for the session, have some introductions of both our panelists, and hopefully get to know you all a little bit better. We're going to have a Q&A, which will consist of some pre-selected questions that the panelists will answer. And then we'll be going into breakout rooms where you can choose who you want to go into a breakout room with and ask questions to specific panelists. And then hopefully we'll have time to go over some next steps of what you can consider when considering taking a gap year. All right, so can I get one lovely volunteer to read out our objectives for the day? And if no one volunteers, I will call on you. I was a teacher.
I could volunteer. Number one, sharing unique experiences and perspectives as panelists. 2, what to consider when considering a gap year or not. And 3, the next steps.
Perfect. Thank you, Devin. I hope I pronounced that right. Yeah, cool. All right. So we're going to introduce our panelists. So first, I'll just go first. My name is Melissa Olvera. I am a PCF alum. I graduated in 2020 from the University of Redlands, specifically their Johnston Center for Integrative Studies program. So I created my own major, which ended up being a BA in community health and educational justice. Again, I use they, she pronouns, and panelists, if we just want to go in order of just like our basic introductions. China, you can go next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy to see your faces. My name is China. You can use any pronouns with me. So you can say they graduated from UC Davis. Their degree is in sustainable agriculture and food systems. They are going to San Diego State University, getting her degree in education now. I did 3 years in between my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. It wasn't fully planned to be a full 3 years, but Rona happened. So that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later on, but I'll pass it over to Melissa.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Canela, or Melissa C. I guess there's two of us here today. It's my pleasure to be here. I am, my pronouns are she, her. I am currently the director of programs for a nonprofit organization called the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. Those of you in the Bay might be familiar. You might even have one of our scholarships as well. And I am a first generation Latina. I graduated from the University of San Francisco in 2016 with my bachelor's in sociology with an emphasis in education. And in 2021, I graduated with my master's of science in justice studies from San Jose State University. And so I took a 3-year pause as well before going on to grad school, and then COVID happened as well during my grad school time. So we'll talk about that too. So yeah, happy to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Juselis. My pronouns are she, her. I graduated from Syracuse, and after Syracuse, I actually worked in education. So I was a teacher, and then I worked for an organization called Beyond 12. Some of you may be familiar with it as well. After that, I went back to school to get my MBA, and I transitioned from that into Deloitte. So currently I'm a consultant for the government. Yeah, so I took a pretty big gap in between my bachelor's and my master's, 6 years before I went back. First generation, first in my family to graduate from college, first in my family to get a master's as well. Originally from New York, currently live in Washington, D.C., and just super excited to be here with you all today. So thank you so much for having me.
Hi, my name is Victoria Rivera. I am currently a law student in London. And so I graduated from San Jose State in spring of 2019 with my degree in political science with double minors in creative writing and philosophy. After that, I straight went into grad school, in which I got my master's in human rights and international relations at the University of Roehampton in London. And then I took a year gap because of COVID and everything. I think it kind of put everybody in that place where we were like so uncertain. And so during that gap year, I decided to pursue my passions in, dabbling in a bit of legal nonprofits. For example, I worked with National Organization for Women, in which my special research was in abortion rights. So, and considering the climate that we live in today, I think that reproductive rights is going to be now more important more than ever. So yeah, I'm very humbled to be here and honored that I could speak. So, yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all for sharing. As you can tell, each of our panelists are amazing and doing great work. But now we would love to get to know you all a little bit with some polls. And so the first poll will be, what year are you in? Are you a junior or are you a senior?
I think I might be the only one that can see the back end of the poll. So just to read off we have 71% participating. So there's still a handful of folks that haven't answered, but 40%, that's 10 folks said they are juniors and 15 saying they are seniors. So 60% are seniors.
Nice. Glad y'all are thinking ahead. And Max, whenever you want to go to the next poll. So the next question is, are you planning to return to school for a secondary degree? Yes or no? So grad school, another bachelor's, maybe a certificate even.
We have about 80 that have filled this out so far, and we have 18 saying yes, they're planning on returning to a secondary school. We have 10 folks saying no, so that's 64% that have said yes, and 36 that have said no.
Nice. Very cool. All right. Oh yeah, there's the results.
I thought I could do that. There we go. Yeah.
Cool. And then our next question, are you considering taking a gap year from school and or work? And you have a few options here. So yes, from undergrad, I'm considering taking a gap year. Yes, from school before graduate school, just generally school. Yes, before jumping into my career, I'm thinking about it, or no. And I guess just to differentiate the top two, like if you're a junior and maybe you want to take a gap year in between your junior and senior year, versus I'm graduating with my bachelor's and I'm taking a gap year between my bachelor's and master's or secondary degree. Nice. Okay, so I see a lot of you are thinking about before grad school, or you're not really sure yet, and that's okay. That's why you're here, right? All right, just a couple more questions. So what are you most concerned about taking a gap year? Money. I'm afraid I won't want to go back to school. I'm afraid I'll be wasting my time, like if you take a gap year, or other. And if you choose other, I might ask you to explain, just so I know that we know. Maybe we could talk about it if we've experienced something similar.
Folks are taking their time thinking about this one. We're at 60% that have filled it out. Oh, there we go. I think we're almost complete. I think there's just a couple more folks. There we go. Okay, I'll share it now.
Money. Yeah, that's real. Especially here if you're local, but really anywhere. That's a big one. I get you. And I'm afraid of wasting my time. Okay. For the 6% that chose other, if you chose other, would you mind saying what your reason is if you're comfortable? If not, that's okay. We can move on. Okay, we can move on to the last poll question. So why do you want to take a gap year if you are for sure or thinking about taking a gap year? You want to save for grad school, you want to use it to travel, to recharge post-graduation. Y'all just went through 4 years of a lot, so why not rest, take care of yourself? or explore options before jumping into a career or a grad program or other.
Just a couple more people to fill this out.
Nice. Okay, so a lot of you want to recharge. Totally get that. I'm currently a grad student and I want to recharge after I graduate. So I feel that. And exploring options to travel. Nice. All right, good to know. Okay, well, thank you all for participating in the polls. It's good to know, who we're kind of presenting to and what we can, assist y'all with specifically. Max, I think we went a little ahead in the slideshow. If we could go back, I think one or two.
Yeah, I apologize about that. Which question would you like me to go to the first question?
Sure. Great, thank you. And okay, so panelists, we're gonna answer these questions. Maybe this one, I think maybe this one everyone already kind of answered, but if we could go around really quick and just say when we graduated from undergrad, that would be great. So I could start off. Melissa O, and I graduated from undergrad in 2020, so right when COVID hit. And we could popcorn to each other. China, if you would want to go.
I graduated from undergrad in 2018.
I graduated from undergrad in 2016.
I graduated in 2013.
I graduated in spring of 2019.
Perfect. Okay, we could go to the next question. All right, so maybe, let's see, time-wise, I think everyone could answer if they want to. So did you attend graduate school? Did you always know you wanted to go to graduate school? And how long after undergrad did you attend graduate school? And if anyone specifically wants to start, go for it.
I'm currently in grad school. I'm doing my master's degree in education. I did not know I always wanted to go to grad school. I considered it very strongly, but I thought it was for smart people. I thought it was for people who were rich. Being first generation, I didn't see myself as any of those things. And when I found out about my program, really was interested. It took me 3 years to get back to school. It was supposed to take 2, but Rona.
So I attended grad school. I graduated in 2021 from grad school. It took me 6 years, as I mentioned earlier, to go from undergrad, and then I had 6 years of work experience, and then I went back to school. I knew I wanted to go to grad school always. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Or what degree I wanted to get specifically, like what kind of program. So I think that's why there was such a significant gap in that time.
So I was gonna say, because I actually do agree with that. So I attended grad school right after I graduated. So I ended up going to grad school in September of 2019. And at the beginning, like when I always wanted to go to grad school because I initially thought I wanted to do I wanted to go straight into a PhD. But then I realized I was like, wait, like that's a lot of time, investment, and it takes up a lot. So I was accepted initially to do a PhD program in USC in philosophy, but I was like, no, let me test the waters and like do a master's to see if it's really like the gist for me. And so for me, I just decided to do it overseas where they had more of a variety of topics that actually piqued my interest. And so I think to answer like, did I always wanted to go to grad school? Like for me, it was always like yes, but then no. So it's always been like a constant fight, but I don't regret it going. So
For me, I think it's one of those things like, oh, are you going to grad school? Like people would ask, right? Once you graduate, like, yeah, sure. Yeah, sounds cool. Maybe someday. That was kind of my like approach or response to it. But in reality, the idea of it kind of freaked me out for many of the reasons that my fellow panelists shared, right? Money and like what am I gonna do? And I'm not sure what to study, which I know was like one of the responses right on the poll is like, I didn't even know. I was like, ugh. And we'll get into it in a little bit more detail as the questions progress. But so it was just kind of an idea floating around me, but I didn't have specifics. I didn't have a plan. I didn't like, I couldn't even say like, yeah, I want to go in a year or 2 years. It wasn't until I joined a leadership program for first generation Latinas and being surrounded by other like-minded, like just other young professionals that had a growth mindset. Some of them were doing grad school, and hearing their perspectives was like, you know what, I can do this, I can do it. And so being in that program really motivated me. And when that program ended is when I signed up for grad school and submitted my application, and I started grad school that fall, which was in 2019.
Awesome. Yeah, and I don't know if I've even said this yet, but I'm also a graduate student right now. I took 1 year in between undergrad and grad school to work with AmeriCorps and teaching. I thought I was going to go to grad school for education, but I'm currently in a social work program. And yeah, I could get into that later, but yeah, we could go on to the next one. All right, so maybe one or two panelists could take this one, or these two. What were your motivations for taking a gap year, and why did a gap year make sense to you, or many gap years?
So yeah, so I can talk about this since I feel like I have the widest gap on the panel. So I knew from when I was in undergrad, it was highly emphasized to me to go out and get work experience first. So I knew that I didn't want to go straight into grad school right out of undergrad. Like I knew I wanted to get a job and work basically. I didn't want to go to grad school, especially because I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And at the time, like the degree I was considering is a degree that I don't even have that degree now. Like I wanted to get a master's in public administration. I ended up getting one in business administration. So the big motivation for me was one, getting that work experience. There's just so much that I learned. There's so much, you learn a lot in school, but you learn a lot on the job. And there's so much that I learned on the job, especially because my first 2 years, I also did an AmeriCorps program, TFA. So I just learned so much through teaching and just in general, like professional experience is just something that's, you can't really get from the classroom. So it just made sense. And I think also in those 6 years, like I was just exposed to so many other degrees and programs I had never heard of. It was my first time, like even learning about what an MBA was. I don't really know too many Black and Latino, Latinx people that have MBAs. So just being exposed to that environment during that time, like I'm glad that I gave myself the space to consider it, because then I would have never been exposed to that sort of environment, and I would have never ended up making the decision that I made, basically.
I'll share two, super similar to what Giselle's just shared. I didn't know what I wanted to do after. I didn't know what my next move was. All I knew was I was really tired from school for 4 years, and I just needed a breather. The other part of it was that I was living in San Francisco, and I'm from San Jose, actually. I'm from East Side San Jose. So I was like, well, I definitely cannot afford to live here. I don't have a job, and I can't just go to school because I don't know what I want to do, right? That's a really important thing to consider, because when you're in undergrad, it's a little bit general. You could take literature in Latin America, you could take like random classes. I'm sure all of you have taken like a really fun like history of music, even though you're like a math major or something like, right? Like you get to really explore. But grad school is very specific. Like you go into grad school saying, I want my MBA, or I want to go into social work. So your entire 2-3 years, however long the program is just focused on that thing. And since I didn't know what I wanted to do, I said, well, there's no way. What am I going to go into grad school for? It'll be a waste of my time and money and resources and time if I'm there not knowing what I want. And so for me, just like Giselle shared, I said, I think what makes most sense is for me to get some work experience and to explore a little bit more so I could see like what is like my passion, what is something that interests me, and then see if it makes sense. There are some careers, quite honestly, it doesn't necessarily make sense or isn't absolutely necessary for you to have a master's or a PhD. There's different purposes for different degrees, right? And so after 3 or 4 years working full time, I said, okay, I want to continue working in nonprofit, continue working directly with the community, advocating specifically for Latinx families here in East San Jose. And so I stumbled upon the Justice Studies program. And my emphasis was that community lens, that like racial and social equity lens throughout the program. So everything I was learning in grad school in my classes was like directly applicable to what I was working on in my job every day, right? So there was like a really direct connection. And so that is what really made sense for me. Some of you might be like, I already know what I want to study. Like, I know that I'm going to become a doctor, or I know that I want to be an engineer or a lawyer, whatever it is that you want to do. So then it might make sense to move on. It might make sense for you to have more experience in your field, and then you go into it, right? So those were my motivations.
I just wanted to say, like, actually, Melissa was very on point about, when you sign up to do like a master's or any sort of field that you want to get into, you're just focused on it's very like the course itself is specific. So what I did was that I did it back to back. I went straight from undergrad straight to grad school, and then when at the end of grad school I got a burnout because I was just like, I can't if I going on like this, I'm going to shut down. So what I did during my gap year was that like my panelist said, I think for me what was important was that I really was passionate about stuff in women's rights and reproductive rights, because that's what I had done my dissertation about. And so I decided to apply for, okay, which nonprofit groups does work with like women or LGBTQ people or any marginalized group that I felt that I could lend help. So that's why because I'm originally from Los Angeles, like that's where I started my work with National Organization of Women, which is known as NOW, and I would work on public policy, looking at the abortion bills and things like that. So it's a lot of that work that was like, oh, I can maybe go to I thought then I was like, because I always thought that I wanted to be like a professor or something, and then like your goals will change and your career will change, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. I think many people make shifts to kind of like realize that your passion may not be with what it was initially, but it's okay to switch. I think there's like this stigma that if you switch careers, like it's a bad move, but I feel like if you switch careers, you're showing that not only do you take the stuff that you've learned in that field, but you bring it with you. So in some ways it's still attached to you. And so it's not a bad thing. I always try to look at the positive aspect, like, okay, what can I bring in from that old job to what can I contribute in this field? Because I think for me, I was so stuck on the fact, I was like, do I really want to dabble in law? And then it wasn't until I went through that process of like, okay, like I really am passionate about this. What can I do to change that? And I realized for me, like maybe going into the legal sector was not such a bad idea. And I think that for me, that was sort of my come to Jesus moment. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Those were really great considerations and things. We can move on to the next question. Yeah, so if a couple more panelists want to take on these two, what are some pros and what are some cons of taking a gap year?
I'll talk about cons and then pros, so we end up behind them. Con was just trying to get some of those references because I'd been gone for 3 years. I still had those academic references, but it was a little bit more difficult. And because my master's degree is in student affairs, so working on a college campus essentially, very different from my bachelor's degree in sustainable agriculture. But also you don't have to have the same master's degree or the same field as what you did in your bachelor's degree. They can be different, that's okay, just like Victoria was saying. So not that it was a con of taking a gap year, just made it an added challenge, but not anything that I think was impossible to get through. But pros, there were so many pros for me. I got to work full time, and like Julissa was saying, it was really, really helpful to get that professional experience. It solidified what I wanted to do. And it gave me time to really research programs that were aligned with what I was interested in. It wasn't just, is this program going to get me to where I want to be in the future? Yes, that's important, but also, does this program have what I want? I wanted programs that were based in social justice, equity, inclusivity. I didn't want them to just say they cared about those things. I wanted that to be in every single class, in the work that we were doing. I wanted it to be really deeply rooted in my program. I wanted to see myself in my professors and in my cohort. I wanted them to have the same experiences as me. I researched a lot. I have a really, really long spreadsheet of like over 30 different schools that I looked into. And I had the time to do all of that. I also had time to look into funding. Originally, I was planning to go to University of San Francisco. I was very excited to go, and then Rona hit. So I decided to go back to the drawing board, apply to more schools, and that ended up in receiving more funding opportunities and having a variety of options rather than choosing from just one or not going to grad school. So it ended up being a really great use of my time because I was able to choose what was best for me and have the money to do it. Those were really huge pros for me.
Before anyone else answers, sorry, just want to make sure that we have enough time for breakout rooms. Why don't we move to the next question? And again, if students, you want to ask these questions to the panelists who weren't able to answer, feel free to do so in your breakout rooms. So was anyone can take this, were you nervous about anything when making this decision to take a gap year? I know some students might be a little nervous too, so.
I mean, yeah, I was nervous because I was like, okay, I'm 3 years out. I've been working, which is a really different rhythm and cadence to when you're in school, right? I had gotten used to like having more free time, to be honest, right? Because I was just working, right? So it's like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, whatever. And I had started enjoying that like time that I had to myself in the evenings, just kind of breathe, do whatever I had to do. So I was nervous about adjusting my time because I knew that it would be like demanding if and when I got around to grad school. But it's it's like riding a bike, right? I was like, oh my gosh, what if it's like too much writing and reading? What if I can't keep up? What if I'm like super slow? I don't know. But it's like riding a bike, right? Once you get into the rhythm, like, okay, like I can do this. Grad school is really all just reading and writing, at least my program. It's just reading and writing, reading and writing, reading and writing, and talking. And so I would say if I was nervous about anything, it was just that rhythm and then the time invested, because I was working full time even during grad school. So I would work all day, 8 to 5, and then my classes were from 5:30 to, I don't even remember anymore, 8, 7:30, 7:45. So that means I'm getting home at 8 o'clock, still have to have dinner, shower, take a break, do homework, and go to sleep because I had work the next day. So I was most nervous about the time commitment. But if you shift around, as your priorities change and, you're moving around different pieces, you can make it work. Some of my colleagues, some of my classmates didn't work. They were just doing grad school full time, which is nice, right? I didn't have that opportunity to do that if I wanted to pay for school. So it was balancing all of those pieces.
All right, and then we'll move on to our last question before breakout rooms. And maybe one person can answer and the rest can answer in your breakout rooms. Oh, I guess I could read it. So if you could go back in time to when you were making this decision to take a gap year or to not take a gap year, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself retrospectively?
To take care of yourself. I think for me what Melissa was saying was that I know when I decided to make that decision to take a gap year from my master's before heading to law school, I think the one piece I think it's just like for many of us that did take a gap year, whether it be for a year, 3 or 6, it's always the fact is that go at your own pace, because I think it's so important. I think we tend to forget, like, we have our own pace about how are we gonna integrate back, because I think what a lot of the panelists have said is so on point, is that, for some of us who do go back to school, you're kind of afraid, like, oh, am I going to keep up with the rest of my peers? Because sometimes there's that doubt in your head where you're like, can I make the time commitment? Can I prioritize all of these objectives that I need to get done? Because at the same time, like, you're not going to be on the same pace as your other classmates. So always, like, be kind to yourself. Like, don't think that just because somebody's ahead of me doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means that you have to pace yourself in a way that it helps you, because it's not your fault that you can't get there. You can get there, but it's like the tortoise and the hare. If you go quick, you're gonna be able to, you're gonna fumble. But if you go slow and take time and take it at your own pace, I feel like you're doing more of a greater service to yourself. Because as all my panelists said, that the grad school hustle is about what you want to do, what you're passionate about, what you see yourself doing. It's what you love. Like, like like one of my panelists said, it doesn't have to be something that you have to do. It's because you want to do it, and it's because you're passionate about it.
So good. Okay, so while Max opens up those breakout rooms, I just want you all to kind of think back to your answers from the polls earlier in the session. Maybe something has changed, maybe a question has popped up in your head, and you'll be able to join a breakout room with one of the panelists. I will stay here in the main room, but yeah, feel free to jump around as well. I believe we'll have about 10 minutes, maybe. Yeah, is that cool? Yeah. But yeah, and if things wrap up, maybe you're done asking questions and you want to just come back to the main room, feel free to do that as well once you're done.
You should all see the options now to join the rooms. Panelists, you should probably join the rooms first, just so that folks feel comfortable joining in. If anyone's having any issues, feel free to message in here. But you should be able to choose your own breakout rooms now, according to which panelists you'd like to speak to. Ah, beautiful. If folks are sticking around here because they don't have a preference, or if they don't know how to choose, I'm happy to just delegate them to a room too as well, Melissa, if you don't mind that.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Marilyn, are you able to pick a room? I can also just delegate one for you if you need.
Yeah, I wasn't able to pick a room.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, do you have a preference for anybody, or is it okay if I just put you into a room?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There you go. You should have a pop-up now letting you go to a room. Yep. Hi, Lisette. Is there anything we can help you with? I'm going to go ahead and put you into a breakout room, Lisette. There we go. If you can hear me, Lisette, there should be a pop-up window now asking you to go into a breakout room.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I hope you're able to get some good conversations, good questions in during your breakout sessions. And if you think of something later, don't worry, you can always reach out afterwards, or I doubt there will be time, but if there's a little bit of time afterwards, feel free to stay. And now we'll go over some action items that you all can take as your next steps in considering if a gap year is for you. So our first piece of advice is to create a checklist of things to consider, or a pro-con list of your own personal things that you're thinking about if you're taking a gap year. And to remember, just as you create this list, you might want to consider the following. So you want to prioritize, right? What are you passionate about? I know some panelists were talking about how specific grad programs can be if you're considering a grad program. Can it relate to your career, whatever you'll be doing during your gap year? And panelists, feel free to jump in at any point. I feel like a lot of people at the beginning when you're taking the polls, you're a little bit worried about wasting your time, but is it really a waste of time? I don't even know if I personally like the term gap year, because you're not really taking a break, right? Unless you're literally doing nothing. And as PCF scholars, I know that you're literally not going to do nothing. So all of y'all are on top of it. And, I don't think it's a waste of time, even if it's recharging, right? Rest and taking care of yourself is super, super important, especially if you're going to be jumping into your career or into a grad program that will be different in terms of demanding of your time and of your energy. Another thing is research, research, research. Research what you might want to do during the gap year. Research grad programs, research things that you could do that might help you elevate yourself as an applicant, whether that's to a career, a job, or a grad program. We'll go over some funding options in a minute. And, I just kind of want to put that out there that if you are going to grad school, always ask for more money. I literally asked for more money and I got $10,000 for free just because I asked. And they had extra money left over from like after they delegated all their scholarships out, they were like, actually, yeah, we can give you more money. And I was like, cool, free money, which is really hard to find in grad school sometimes. And yeah, just keep applying to scholarships. I am applying to scholarships. I try to, like, throughout the year, even though I'm still a student, just like I did in undergrad. You never know what could happen, and people do want to give you their money. You just have to, look in the right places. Another note that I just wanted to make is, and I don't know, for those of you who took like a few years in between undergrad and grad school, but FAFSA, one of my friends who worked in between for a few years between undergrad and grad school, FAFSA does take into account like the money that you're making during that time, right? And so since I worked for AmeriCorps for a year, I was still able to get my EFC as 0 because it is like a service job, service year job, and it was through AmeriCorps. But my friend who was working for a few years, like, her EFC was kind of high because she was making money during that time. I'm not discouraging that. I think you should do whatever is best for you, but just something to take into account, because that's probably not something y'all have experienced yet. And remember that this whole experience, this list that you'll make, is very unique to you, and you're not alone. So please reach out to friends, family, your network, and ask all the questions. Ask us more questions. Reach out on LinkedIn, or I know some panelists gave their emails or contact information. Feel free to put that in the chat if you're comfortable. But yeah, these are all really important. And if any panelists want to add anything to that, please do.
On the topic of funding, you are considered an independent when you go to grad school, so that can impact your funding. If you're interested in the CSUs, up to a certain amount for your EFC, you can have a grant that covers 75% of tuition at the CSUs. Add a couple of scholarships in there, that's a free grad program, so consider that.
I don't know if, Melissa, you want me to get to that last part? Transitions really nicely to what China just shared, and we talked about this in my group, right? Financial aid options are really limited, I will say, if you're working already, even just post-grad school, because you've already exhausted a lot of your 4-year funds, right? And so there's a couple of pieces of advice. One, I would say what I think personally, based on my experience, is the key to success is local scholarships. They're a lot less competitive. They're really specific to students that are here, in my experience, in the Bay Area. So really capitalize on resources that PCF has. I don't know if we ended up having a slide for it, Melissa, the other ones that we shared.
Oh yeah, Max, if you want to go to the next slide.
The Silicon Valley Community Foundation is a scholarship database that you can look into. All you have to do is create an account, and based on your profile that you fill out, it'll filter any and all scholarships that you're that you're eligible to apply for. And it's free to just make an account, and whatever you're eligible for will pop up. So please, I would say, make an account there. And if you go to the next slide, there's a couple of other local scholarships that are really helpful here in the Bay Area. I myself am the recipient of the Chicana Latina Foundation Scholarship. The Bay Area Gardeners Foundation Scholarship is another one. Julio Mata Family Scholarship. 10,000 Degrees is another scholarship database. I'm actually not exactly sure if they're grad school. 10,000 Degrees, I think they're community college to undergrad. Yeah, please screenshot this slide. These are only a couple. There's a lot of local scholarships out there that you can apply for. That's how I paid for grad school. Is local. That's even how I paid my first year of USF, is with scholarships like these. And the other, well, that's the funding piece. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add before we go into the last part. is just kind of like general advice. If you're not exactly sure what you want to study, or not exactly sure what direction you want to go in, we talked about this in my group. Just get involved so you can find like what your passion is. Volunteer, look up other community organizations or companies that are in the fields that kind of interest you, like kind of get your feet wet, and the answer will come to you as to what you want to study and if you want to go into grad school, if it's necessary for you based on the career choice that you're picking. So I'll pause there, and I hope that was helpful, and please feel free to reach out. We all put our emails in the chat.
Yes, thank you all for coming to this. I know Max has one action item for you all, but it was great to talk to you all this morning.
Yes, thank you. Before everyone starts heading out, just a reminder that we do ask that you fill out a survey. And so I know you're putting a bunch of thank yous into the chat. And once that slows down, I'll put the link in the chat. But you can also find the link to the survey in your CVent attendee hub. And so we do expect to fill out these surveys just so that we can improve our programming and also so our presenters get some feedback. And so please feel free to take a few minutes to fill out this survey before you all go. But otherwise, thank you all for attending. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Melissa, for presenting this content, and thank you everybody for coming through today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.